side, and the black king doesn't seem to be under that much of a under that much attack on the queen side. But I think it's kind of hard when you're used to casting on one side in the opening. You know, you think, well, I'm gonna probably cast on that side, almost definitely. So he's, why would I mess up my pawn structure over here when it's perfect? Because you see before, it's just how a player playing this line would want it. From d6 to e6 into the f7, g7, h7 pawns. It's exactly as you draw it up. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but I think black opens a lot of lines, and more importantly, stays safe with bishop g7. With g takes f6, but instead, bishop takes f6 is played in the game, and I think that opens up the e5 trick again, because after takes, same thing, the rook hangs. But instead, Nino goes ahead and plays a somewhat dubious piece sacrifice here. I don't think it's necessarily bad because she has a big attack. The king goes to f8, and she does get 3 pawns. She has 3 pawns for the piece. And it really fits her MO. She's an attacking player, as we've seen in this game and from her past history. But I just think that winning a piece outright clearly is the way to go. So she goes ahead and plays queen to h5. I think there are, clearly she's hitting the f7 square here. Excuse me. The f7 square here with the knight and the queen. So there are 3 ways, at least 3. I'm pretty sure there's only 3. You have 3 ways to defend it. First of which is the pretty tempting g6. The reason why I say it's tempting is because you get to attack, you get to hit the white queen with tempo. Plus, the g7 square is a potential escape square for the king. Although I'm not sure after something like queen h6, you're gonna have to play. You're gonna have to play either gonna have to play bishop g7, which blocks the escape square, or you're gonna have to move the king back to the center with e7, which clearly Doug wouldn't be thinking of with the move g6. Another move would be queen c7, which has the advantage of not having to create weaknesses on the side that your king's on. What I mean is, for example, after g6 is played, there are weaknesses on h6 and f6. By the way, so queen c7 is an idea, and also rook a7 is an idea. Nice thing about rook a7 that I like is not only does it defend all the way across the file, but more importantly, the rook. If you look at where the rook is now, it's not really doing a lot. It's hitting the pawn on a2, but the bishop is hitting a2 right now. And that's the bishop. You could play something like knight takes bishop, and then the rook hits a2. But the thing is, after rook takes bishop or knight takes bishop, black's losing one of his best pieces in the c5 knight, and also white just plays pawn takes b3, and there's no pawn to hit there. Granted, he'll have an open a file, but the rook isn't really doing that much. Excuse me. So I think rook a7 is good. The reason I like it over queen c7 is because basically the queen's on a pretty good diagonal now. It's on the longest diagonal it can be on. It also has some pressure down the c file, but most importantly, it's the most powerful piece on the chessboard, and you don't want to allocate your most powerful piece to a pure defender, unless necessary. So I would say, if I looked at which probably would happen, something like rook a7, and then bishop, and then e5, and then maybe bishop to d8, which isn't a good spot for it. It's pretty passive here, but I don't know. I mean, it's fairly passive there, but at least I don't. At least you're not creating a bunch of weaknesses. Right off, the thing that would scare me most would be something like knight takes, and then at rook takes or something like that. I mean, but clearly, I don't know. That's pretty scary too. I mean, Doug's um, definitely not out of the woods with any of this. Um, Maybe actually you can just play g6 here even, um, and then after the queen's forced to move, and then e5 hangs. So actually, um, I still like rook a7, um, because e5 just ends up dropping the pawn. All right. So in the actual game, g6 is played, which it's hard to blame Doug. It's a pretty tempting move. Like I said, he forces the queen to answer right away and move. But she does find queen h6, which denies black's king any escape. Which is a real good trait of any attacking player. If you're attacking the king, one of the things you got to watch for is just the complete release that can be found by escaping. If she had just played, something like, for example, something like queen back, and then Doug gets to play something like this, and all of a sudden, he basically castled manually, and he's all right. So after g6, check, and then queen f4, and once again we're hitting f7, and rook a7 might be tempting again. Queen c7 is kind of scary just because there's a lot of discovery type things that could happen. So f6 is played, once again moving a pawn on the king side and weakening the e6 square, which clearly white has his eye on it already. So white goes straight for that weak pawn, which is pinned to the king. Another thing that I want to say about, I talk about these escape squares, and throughout the whole game, it just feels like Doug is really trying to get his king moved to the seventh rank, which I think is or just the seventh rank so he can move his rook out, because you see this whole game, this rook here on h8 has been dead, and even though he's been up a piece on the board, granted she has 3 pawns for it, he's been up a piece, but in fact he's down in exchange because his rook isn't doing anything. Alright, so bishop c4 is played, and clearly the threat is bishop to b5, which appears to be a really strong move, way to deflect the queen. And it seems like there's all sorts of really threatening ideas. After bishop b5 and the queen's forced to flee, and then I don't know, you can play a pawn up, and then knight to c4, or different ideas, which unleashes the rook, and so you can just see all these ideas brewing for white, and it's really scary because you can't see anything really brewing for black, except for trying to get this rook into the game. So after bishop c4, bishop a6 is played in an effort to deflect that bishop and trade off what was a bad piece on c8 for what's really a pretty good piece that's possibly heading to b5, and even on the diagonal it's on now hits the e6 square, which could be a real weak after something like rook e1 with the playing there, playing down the file.